Canada's premiers are meeting this week for the last time before the federal election. And although that election, of course, looms large for the provinces and territories, premiers are also focused on something else: interprovincial trade. The Canadian Free Trade Agreement took effect 2 years ago, but barriers still exist all over the place. In fact, one Senate report estimates they cost the economy here in Canada $130 billion a year. Today, the premiers announced that provinces and territories will be able to unilaterally remove exemptions they had under the CFTA. The move is expected to help speed up the process. So what does it mean for interprovincial trade in Canada? Will it actually overall be made any easier? And joining me now from Saskatoon is Manitoba's Premier Brian Pallister. Hi, Premier. Great to see you again.
You too, Vashi.
I know that you are a longtime advocate for lowering internal trade barriers within the country. I want to get to that in 1 second. But first, there is some big news in other parts of the country around Bombardier and layoffs. And I heard some of your counterparts talking about an ask or a discussion that occurred today between the premiers for the federal government to kind of look at what they can do to secure exemptions around Buy American policies in the U.S. Can you tell us a bit about what that discussion was like?
Only in a general sense, Vashi. I mean, we're all concerned with trade issues right now, obviously, and the U.S. Buy America policy is clearly discriminatory and protectionist in its nature and its intent. So as a trading province, a premier of a trading province in Manitoba, I can tell you that we're really concerned about any restrictions on our ability to do things to help people in other countries like the United States get better products at better prices. So, we'll continue to work with the other premiers to remove whatever impediments we can to free trade.
Is the federal government the lead on that? Is that the hope? Is there any communication between, your province and the federal government around what they are doing to try and secure those exemptions?
Well, there's obviously, given recent trade discussions, there's a lot of interface between provinces and the federal government on this, and I've appreciated that actual openness and the communication that we've enjoyed from the Prime Minister's office, from his trade minister. I expect that to continue. And certainly various premiers expressed concern this morning, and we'll continue to advance the agenda of free trade. We're free traders in this country.
Let me ask you about free trade within the borders of this country, because I know it's something that you and other premiers have talked about for a long time. I was doing an interview yesterday and sort of remembering how many interviews I've done at these various meetings about lowering those barriers to trade within this country. Is anything tangible going to come out of this meeting? Because it sure hasn't always.
No, fair point. I mean, I remember in Manitoba as a cabinet minister there in the 90s, advancing the idea of setting up a national trade organization. And some improvements have been made over the last 25 years, more in the last 2, I would say, than in the previous 23. So what we've seen is now agreement among all premiers. And I think part of this stems from the obvious trade impediments and threats that we have to face from some of our trading partners, whether it be China, the US, or others. But I think Canadians understand the importance of being able to find markets and to get the free exchange of goods and services going. And they know, too, from many reports, International Monetary Fund, for example, just released a report saying that this is equivalent to about a 7% tariff that we charge each other because of our own internal trade barriers. So it's a high priority. As far as positive progress, much. We now have provinces having to list where they're making exceptions rather than list what they're willing to trade. That's a massive change. We've changed the process today by agreement so that provinces can reduce their lists of exceptions without any impediment or any process delays. That's really good. And we've also made significant progress in things like trade among provinces with alcoholic beverages. We've got 10 provinces buying in on no limits now. We've got agreement on transport rules. Financial services rules are coming up by the end of the year. And many other categories. Workplace safety issues would be another example. Big category that we discussed today, and I think is very important, is the whole issue of labor being able to move freely across and among provinces in the country. We need to address that better than we have to date. And that means credentials recognition, and it means accepting other provinces' standards when it comes to training or guidelines around professional preparedness, that type of thing. Because Canadians should be able to move, and in a healthy country, labor has to be mobile as much as capital does. So I think there's been big progress made, but much more needs to be done, and it will get done.
Where does the federal government stand with respect to what kind of progress still needs to occur? In the past, you'd floated the idea of legislation or tying action to federal healthcare money being given to provinces. What is your take right now as things stand of what kind of role the federal government should be playing in helping to reduce those barriers?
Well, it's a really significant point you're making, Vashi, because the federal government does maintain more exceptions than any province by a mile. On procurement, for example, just a lot of different rules that limit the ability of small and medium-sized enterprises, for example, to participate in tendering processes that would result in better deals for Canadian taxpayers and more fairness among provincial businesses that they could participate in those processes. So the federal government has a lot of work to do. The right sound has come out of the Trudeau government, but now we need follow-up. And I've been on this for a long time, as you know, and I know that the consensus among the premiers is that we'll continue to press Ottawa to do its part, and that we'll continue to offer to work with them to assist in improving the situation so that we can put more money back on the kitchen tables of Manitoba and Canadian families.
Does that mean legislation, though, Premier? Are you looking for specifically legislation from whoever forms the federal government in the upcoming election where internal trade is concerned, or interprovincial trade?
Well, I would say that part of the reason, Vashi, that there's been so little progress over such a long time is the complexity of dealing with these issues. It isn't just dozens, it's hundreds, if not thousands of issues that have to be addressed. So some may require legislative change, others are regulatory in nature. Either way, the progress has to be pursued, and it'll require persistence, diligence, and focus, and partnerships to get the job done. But right now, for example, Ontario has a rule that prohibits the harvesting of bullfrogs by people from Manitoba. Now, I know this isn't going to solve our gross domestic product problem, but it's an example of the kind of dumb nature of some of these archaic restrictions that we have still in various provinces. So I know that we're going to make progress. I've heard from the premiers today, they're committed to this, and I'm very excited by the level of commitment that I'm seeing demonstrated in the discussions today.
Before I let you go, Premier, you have spoken about your opposition to Quebec's Bill 21. You called it, you said that it sends an un-Canadian message to people who wear religious symbols that they need to hide or that they're less acceptable for some reason, not just for what they wear, but for what they believe. I just heard a question from a reporter to Premier Legault and Premier Moe about whether or not it had come up in discussion. Premier Moe said that it had not. Have you spoken to Premier Legault about your feelings on Bill 21?
I've raised this in private discussion. I won't get into with who, but I would say the vast majority of premiers already know my views on this issue. I'm a farm boy. I'm concerned when I see erosion, not just of our soil, but of our rights and our freedoms. And I think that in this country, one of the things certainly that most of us celebrate is our tolerance and our diversity as people. So when I see threats to those things, then I speak up. I have, and I will continue to.
I know you say that the conversations have occurred in private, but why have more premiers not joined you in speaking out publicly? Have they told you why?
I expect you'll have to take that up with the other premiers. All I can say is on a matter of principle that is important to me, I have to look myself in the mirror. I have to be sure that I conduct myself in a way that I feel is in keeping with my values. And I believe that Manitoba is one of the most multi-ethnic, multinational provinces, and I certainly think that Manitobans respect and value our diversity. We just came through Canada Day, after all. We didn't celebrate sameness there. We celebrated the diversity that is our country, and that has to continue. And so again, I'll speak on the issue. I have, and I'll continue to.
Are you disappointed that none of your counterparts have joined you?
Well, that would be their personal choice. Some may feel they have other priorities currently that are more important. I see issues that affect human rights and personal freedoms as being paramount, and regardless of other agenda items, I have spoken on this issue because my convictions tell me that people of all races, creeds, and colors need to feel not only accepted in our country, but celebrated in their citizenship. So that's exactly where this is coming from for me. Other premiers, community leaders, federal politicians will will make their own call on whether they wish to speak on this issue. I have made my call.
All right, I'll leave it there. Thank you, Premier Pallister. Pleasure having you on the show again.
Always nice to talk to you, Vashi.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video. Thanks for watching.